Joining me now is Senior Fellow at the Atlantic Council, Dr. Ariel Cohen. Dr. Cohen, thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
All right, let's start with our question of the day here. Why should Americans care about a country that, to be honest, a good majority of Americans haven't even heard about?
Well, first of all, Moldova is a country of about 3 million people. It is sandwiched between the countries of Romania, a NATO member, an EU member, and Ukraine. Part of Moldova is occupied by pro-Russian rebels. And the main thing about Moldova is that allegedly $18 billion were laundered through its banking system. So the banking system was privatized, was captured by the oligarchs, and the main one of them is a guy with an unpronounceable name, Vlad Plahotniuk. And they laundered more than twice the size of their GDP, of their gross national product. Imagine that. Our GDP in the United States is 17 trillion with a T dollars. So laundering something like $40 trillion, that's the equivalent of Moldova did. And then they went after their central bank reserves, up to $1 billion, almost 20% of their GDP. The same thing if we had $1 trillion from Fort Knox stolen from the United States.
Right, that's an absolutely enormous number, especially when you compare it percentage-wise. And before we even go any further, how did you know I was going to let you do the pronouncing of that name and not tackle it myself? Tell me about this man, though. He's an oligarch. It's said that he doesn't just control the nation, he actually owns it.
Yeah, in our business, we call it state capture, which means one oligarch or several oligarchs control the parliament, the banking system. We heard what they did with the banking system. They turned it into a laundromat. They control restaurants. They control the gas distribution company. Everything is controlled by Mr. Plahotniuk and his cronies. And now there's an active U.S. government investigation against the cronies of Mr. Plahotniuk, who emptied the reserves of the central bank, and the fingers are being pointed at the man himself. There is a gentleman who defected from Moldova who is currently in the United States talking to our government officials. He was a lieutenant colonel in the Moldovan anti-corruption, anti-money laundering system. He is here. His name is Mr. Mikhail Goffman. There are others who are coming out of the woodwork now, and they captured in Ukraine. The Moldovans tried to arrest the right hand of the oligarch, and they tried to bring him back to Moldova, and now the FBI is reaching out to him, and he is talking to U.S. government.
Right, so sooner rather than later, the United States government is going to get to the bottom of this, and it's not going to be speculation anymore. I want to ask you two things about something you just said. The first is about the $1 billion that was either a bank heist or it was siphoned via corruption from the three central banks. That's the first thing. The second thing, we'll get to the actual money laundering, who they're working for that. But tell me about the bank heist, this siphoning of the funds. How did that even happen? That's an enormous amount of money.
Right. That is, as I said, the Moldovan GDP is $8 billion. They stole 1/8, so 16%. So let's say, in the U.S. terms, it would be the equivalent of stealing $1 trillion. They moved around. It was a shell game by this Vlad Plahotniuk and the prime minister who worked for him and this guy that they captured in Ukraine. To me, it is like watching the Moldovan version of the House of Cards. It's unbelievably corrupt. It's unbelievably violent. One guy committed suicide by shooting himself in the heart twice. Not once, twice. Killing himself in the parliament. So we are dealing with a system of stealing assets from the central bank, moving it into the bank that they control, and then moving it offshore. And you know what else? A global pyramid scheme in which millions and millions of dollars of the American money of defrauded Americans somehow ended up in Moldova in the banks belonging to these oligarchs. And now it's our government that is looking into this heist of the century, the white-collar crime that you haven't seen before.
Right, the white-collar crime of the century is what it sounds like. I've never heard of anything like this. Dr. Cohen, before we run out of time, talk to me about the money laundering here, because the question of the day, and this still stands, while this is very interesting, we want to know, why do Americans care about this? And one of the reasons, I think, is that the money laundering that is happening in Moldova is happening from Russia, from Iran, and from Libya, places that are strategic for Russia against the United States.
So the corrupt oligarchs in Moldova, like this gentleman we mentioned before, Mr. Plahotniuc, and others, the Prime Minister Filat, who is in jail now, Plahotniuc put him in jail, they opened Moldova wide open for the Russian mafia, for Gaddafi's money, for terrorists' money. They were warned specifically by the Romanian intelligence, don't deal with these people, and they still went because they're greedy, and they dealt with them. And guess what? $18 billion, more than twice the size of the GDP of this tiny country, was laundered, and this money went into the EU, Cyprus, UK, etc. The British Parliament is also now investigating what Moldova did in terms of money laundering. It is an untenable situation. We need to put a stop to it.
Right, and Dr. Cohen, as this investigation continues, both by the United States and by the UK, I hope you'll come back and update us on this, because it is a very interesting story, rampant corruption. And thank you so much for being here today. We're out of time, but it was great to talk to you. All right, let us know what you think. Is this something that we as Americans should care about? Tweet your answer to Liz_Wheeler. Share your thoughts, and we'll be back in a minute.